This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, Joey asks me about rules of thumb. Woo!
Why, like, the same songs pop into my head,
Every
and they're
time.
like it's like not the right song. This is what a Joey sounds like that gets like Selena Gomez or the Carpenters stuck in his head every time I try to.
You're cueing yourself
Yeah.
to make certain mental music.
Yeah, like that it happened one day that I was like, don't you remember you told me you loved me, baby? And but like, I haven't heard that song in like, I don't know, a decade at least. But like for some reason, it just, here we are. This is what a Joey sounds like. And this is what an executive producer and human jukebox, Jess Vander, sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess.
Jess, the housekeeping I have for you is a brief episode of The Girls Are Fighting.
Tell me more.
It's a Jess-specific episode of The Girls Are Fighting.
My word.
I saw this earlier this week from someone named Chris Brunette, who is maybe a journalist or something like the Regeneron International Science Fair and Engineering Fair, ISEF, the world's largest and most prestigious science fair, took place last week. The winner of the Environmental Engineering Division, which came with a cash prize of $5,500 or $55,000, cheated and had an article that read, "Exclusive Scandal at America's Top Science Fair."
Whoa.
In which someone, the winner, whom I'm not going to cite their name because they're 17 years old and that feels weird. Nonetheless, the winner apparently plagiarized portions of their work. I am not a science fair guy. I'm not against science fairs, but like, you know, writing your posters or your papers or whatever, there's an image that he used that just mirrored the image so that maybe it would be like less searchable as copywriting, or took graphs from other people's journal articles and things like that. So the girls are fighting.
Oh, is that a girls are fighting, or is this just a scandal?
It's a scandal.
What's the distinction between the two?
Yeah, I think there's like fighting within this arena about like what is fair or not, and how will the International Science and Engineering Fair respond to it. Mm-hmm. As part of the article, it said, honestly, ISEF is probably going to sweep this under the rug unless it comes to the news. Someone needs to send it to CNN or something, in quotes.
Wow.
Scenes from inside The Girls Are Fighting.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, dubious that that's not fair. Just who claims that they are the top science fair?
Yeah,
and
first of all.
And also science fair versus other types of competitive and or important young minds science program
Competitions.
competition.
We're not talking about the Science Olympiad, are we?
That's what I'm just saying.
You're trying not to say it.
I didn't say it.
Well, you don't want those girls to be fighting the ISEF or the Science Olympiad. Who's better? Who can say?
Who can say? Yeah, that's a great point. Also, I just think it's amazing that in our times that people still think they can get away with plagiarism.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's tough. But also, like, why didn't they catch it as part of this is, I mean, after all, this is the Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair. Do they not have the budget to like do a quick like reverse image search or something like that? I don't know. Because people seem to have quickly figured it out on their own. But, you know, I don't know how many participants are at said fair.
I don't know.
Too great a burden.
Yeah, I don't even know. Wow. Well, disappointment.
Well, and that concludes our episode of The Girls Are Fighting. Jess, what I did want to talk to you about today is something I saw, which was someone sharing like a piece of folk wisdom, I guess you might call it, or like personal rule of thumb of like some sort of knowledge that a person built up on their own in their own way of understanding the world. And I was like, I think this is true and I'm going to adopt it now. So someone named Jean Yang said, 2 important lessons I learned in my 20s. If you think everyone hates you, you probably need to sleep. If you think you hate everyone, you probably need to eat. And I was like, shoot, I'm almost 40. This took me a long time to get here, but not the like the hangry one, like I think everyone knows, but this idea of you think everyone hates you, you probably need to sleep. I was like, I think I felt that like recently. Like, wait, is that why? And so I wanted to ask you, what types of folk knowledge or rules of thumb do you live by?
It's so interesting that, like, there are so many platitudes or famous sayings or folk wisdoms that are passed down, and before you have had an experience where you can personally relate to that thing, that you're like, yeah, duh, and then some new meaning gets bestowed upon it once you have, I don't know, like a very personal experience of it. It's why it's like really frustrating when older people are like, oh, just you wait, like inserts me trying to say like, oh, young people always think this, like you think you're immortal or whatever, and you're like, no, I don't, and then you become old and you're like, I see what they meant, but that, yeah, I see it now. I so hear you on the sleep thing. This is an example of something that is very relatable to me, and it's actually a conversation Brian and I have had a lot, because I think for him, hunger or hanger or whatever is a debilitating state of being. Being tired is a debilitating state of being for me, and I am shockingly horrible at recognizing it in myself, despite it being a nearly daily occurrence of like that moment where all of a sudden you're like, not only am I experiencing diminishing marginal returns of being awake and like using my evening, because I'm really bad at that, the revenge bedtime procrastination concept comes to mind. If you remember the idea that like you're like, I didn't get a full enough day, so now I'm just staying awake because this is me reclaiming time. Like I am absolutely one of those people. And it's like, we were just joking yesterday. I think it was like yesterday. Like Ryan has taken to using the phrase, I think it's bedtime. Like, I don't know. Like, is it bedtime? And I'm like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Don't say that to me.
Don't say that to me. And I don't know, there's something that you brought, like bringing this to the table is like, those wisdoms can be so resonant and yet still so hard to apply in the moment.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I always think about I think some of it is just like the distillation is quite nice, right?
Yeah.
Like if you think everyone hates you, you probably need to sleep is just like, oh yeah, that's like I probably have said things in the past of like when I get too tired, I'm like emotionally not as resilient. Things like that. But I'm like, no, that's the rule. Like that like this is the rule. And I was trying to think about like, are there other ones that like I'm so oriented towards idioms and sort of like folk
not
phrases.
Not just the idea, but like the way it's formed. Yeah, I feel like for me it's slightly different. Like I don't know if I catch as much to the specific way.
Yeah.
Maybe that just says something about me and my relationship with poetry. Like maybe that's not the thing for me, but I definitely do associate it with like the person who taught me that lesson. Like, not that this encapsulates that person in my mind, but definitely like when I think of the sleep rule, like I think of my brother who believes it himself, and like we had a conversation about it, and I associate that rule with him as it is a rule we share. I think similarly, another rule that comes to mind, though this isn't a beautiful articulation, another rule that comes to mind that's like a thing my mom taught me is do the extra thing.
Yeah.
Like the other day, I was with her for Mother's Day, and she, in the classic maternal moment of like, let me iron that for you. And she like grabbed my sweater, cardigan, I don't know exactly what it was, and started ironing it. And she was like going over this same piece like several times, and I was like, oh, that's good enough. And she was like, it is not.
Yeah.
It like, no, it is not. And I'm going to get this last little thing that's showing there. And maybe that's how perfectionists are made.
Yeah. I feel like, yeah. My dad, the equivalent is like, you're not stupid, don't act like it. Like that's the like closest thing that I can think of from like a family setting. I think like, there are other things that you start to internalize, and I feel like you being like the greater you, like you brought up recently, like the rule of threes, like in the context of client interactions. I'm like, the time that you want someone to like buy into an idea should be the third time that they're encountering that idea, because the first time anyone encounters anything, even if they love it, is like scary or like new, or you kind of have to like let people acclimate to where change doesn't feel like change, because even good change is still hard. But I'm those are sort of like things that you take on over time, and it made me like want to have more of these in my life, and I just couldn't think of like what they are. Like I'm sure that I have those things, and you've talked about like fingerprint phrases and things like that. I guess like maybe an equivalent one that I often use with folks, like, what's the bad thing? And I'm just like, I don't, like someone comes and is saying they're stressed about something or they're concerned about something. I'm like, well, like, what's the bad thing? And they're like, well, it's this. And I was like, is that bad? Like, so the worst thing that could happen is X. Like, what would we do if X happened? And it was like, we would do this. And it's like, yeah, we would. Like,
that's true.
Like, it doesn't sound good, but it doesn't sound that bad,
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. It's interesting, like even the types of these that we're collecting, not just like the way they're formatted, but sort of the type of thing is more like some of the ones you're bringing are like sort of a fundamental logic for the sleep thing. Or in this case, like it's almost like what's the right thing to do or say in this moment. I'm realizing a number of the ones that I have are very much like fitting into the pithy sort of voice on the shoulder of like, no, like slap in the face, like, no, think about it like this. Like, what are you doing? Almost like wake up call type ones. Like now I'm realizing that my brother Ben definitely has several of these in my mind. Like another one that he's given me is, you're an adult.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example of like, oh, I haven't gotten around to like scheduling my blank yet. He's like, what are you doing? Do that. You're an adult. And I'm like, you're right, I'm an adult.
I am an adult.
Like, right. It's like almost like, okay, pull myself up by the bootstraps. Like, I can do this. I also think, I don't know, this is like a combo thing from him. I've heard variations from other people in life too, but there's another one of like, that's what money's for.
Yeah.
It's like, or in this instance, like, it's really, really cool having income to be able to do certain things.
Yeah. You don't need to make your own tortillas. You can go to the store and buy them.
Actually, you know what? That's what money's for. We should just get someone's help, or we should buy that and save ourselves the time of trying to make it from scratch. Like, exactly. Like making dumplings, you could make the dough yourself. It's so easy. It's also really time consuming.
Yeah.
Maybe this is.
Yeah, we should buy dumpling wrappers.
We should buy dumpling wrappers.
Yeah. Like my mom was always like, God helps those who help themselves. And my mom is like not particularly religious or anything like that. Like, I think she believes in God. I don't know. But it would just always like, it was basically like a similar thing of like, no one else is going to do it for you. Like, I need this or I want this. It is like a very similar pull yourself up by the bootstraps type of thing. And she's just like, God helps those who help themselves. Like, which just meant like, you better deal with it because I'm not, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. It's also, I'm realizing this must relate to like past conversations we've had about life lessons, because I distinctly recall us talking before about my list of life lessons things, which are more like practical subjects, which we've discussed before, rather than just like
the night before the night before.
Yeah, exactly. The night before is exactly the one. And I wrote a progress report snippet about this too for our 100th, which I'm now thinking.
The night before is you should get sleep the night before the thing happens.
Exactly, which full circle, I learned from Mr. Grovin, Science Olympiad coach, back in high school. And it is extremely true. Now I'm obviously going to have to pull that up so I can.
So what we're learning is that we're adults, and also that I am fascinated by encountering like pieces of folk wisdom to the point where at some point we have spoken about this in the past. And the fact that I was like, if you think everyone hates you, you probably need to sleep, was like just a discovery for me.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, should we do a dramatic reading of these practical guidance tips?
I mean, I would love to hear. Can you do it in a Werner Herzog accent?
No, I don't think I can do that. But you can.
If you have a important event, then maybe you should consider that the night before you should get at least an adequate amount of sleep before you're being pulled down into the void of your own tiredness towards the eventual destruction of your ego as you're no longer able to sustain yourself. Werner doesn't have the same ring.
It doesn't. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that. I wonder what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the structure is so. It is like the opposite end of this like folk wisdom spectrum. Like this is just like, and I guess also it is more aligned with how I remember things in my mind of like, okay, Dawn dish soap and hydrogen peroxide removes pit stains. When in doubt, confirm the dress code. Maybe it's because you're allergic. Put lights in and out of the Christmas tree, not just around it. That's a huge one.
Big one. That's a big one.
That second open compartment in the dishwasher is for extra detergent to pre-wash a load. So you fill both. Fun fact. Driving, it's the car ahead of you that matters. Sleeping, it's the night before a big day that matters. Saving and investing is extremely cool. Floss. Check your eggs before you buy. People love mail. Send some. Carefully, you can and should trim your eyebrows. And yet, like, I think what we're doing now is we're creating a new list that is more like the
I mean, that is like practical advice, right? It's like this is a thing in the world and you should do it. And I think it is like the difference between wisdom being sort of like generalizable philosophical concepts as opposed to sort of like, if you're weighing things at the grocery store, you should tear the scale,
It's funny that you use the word wisdom because it's something that has even come up in our work. If you are familiar with the Amazonian way, the company, there is this concept of tenets, and tenets are meant to offer wisdom and guidance to teams to make judicious decisions themselves. So you're not giving them the floss type advice. You're giving them the here's how you should think about this. Here's a mental model, and a way to break ties or a way to figure things out. And so the idea of, it's almost like the rule of threes type example actually seems more practical. And maybe even but the how do you help impart the way to diagnose something, like the sleep idea is that's the wisdom, that's the guidance of it might be this if it's this.
The generalizability. I was trying to think about it as you said that, the idea of tools not rules. Is that applicable here, right?
Or is it rules not tools?
Well, in theory, in this instance, is wisdom a tool as opposed to a rule, right? Or going back to sort of in operant conditioning, punishment extinguishes a behavior. It is narrow, whereas reinforcement generalizes a behavior. And so when we wrote the book on influence, I had put in a portion, I'm trying to write this in a way where you can think through the lens of influence, in the way that people talk about going to law school is trying to teach you how to think the law as opposed to learn every law that there is on the books.
Right. That being, I think at first blush, I think of that as what the word rule means, but I get now the premise of that saying tools not rules is teach a man to fish.
Yeah.
It's how do you make sure someone is thinking about the right thing? It almost reminds me of our incentives and KPIs and metrics conversation of setting the right goals and not accidentally reading into it too literally when actually your goalpost might have changed. It's that, but the life version. Yeah, the life version.
It is this. It's sort of like a hotkey, or a hyperlink within, we have this entire document or entire site, but if you want to just jump to this part, here's a link that allows you to jump to that part, right? This idea of if you think everyone hates you, you might need sleep. It is man, I'm feeling funny. Do I think everyone hates me? Yes. It just allows you to
gonna be it.
Jump past, shortcut all of the why am I feeling this way, and do they have, we've just had a great conversation. It's actually I'm thinking that no one likes me right now, so maybe I just need a nap, and that could solve everything. I mean, certainly the food one is I've caught myself getting upset before, frustrated and sort of anger coming up, and I'm when was the last time I ate? You somehow can logic above it. You're still feeling angry, but you're did I eat anything? Yeah. Oh no, I need to eat something.
Well, and that's what I think is interesting, right? Is it comes back to the thing we were talking about at the beginning of how do you short circuit whatever the thing is that is happening and get yourself to the get yourself to be wise again, especially if you're not in that mode. It's And this idea of coining it or making it a thing is interesting. Like I distinctly recall however you feel about how it ended and also how well it has endured. How I Met Your Mother, there's a thing between Lily and Marshall, beloved couple in that show, that when they're in arguments, they institute the rule of the pause, wherein they're allowed to just at any time just decide to like walk it off, cool down, like just because it doesn't feel like it's being productive anymore, and they can unpause later when it feels like a more appropriate time. But the idea of like, that very sticky, memorable, coinable idea of the pause is like, I can invoke the right of pause now. Ha ha. That is something that I can do. It just makes me think that actually there really is something powerful about and more usable about coining these wisdoms to make them a more useful tool, or like to put them in your tool belt, right? Otherwise they might just like get stuck under a pile of mental boxes and be like, oh, I forgot. I should have reminded myself that I can be an adult now.
Yeah, like shorthanding things. Like I have like a list of like I guess mental models or things like that, like or like weird rules like Brandolini's law and stuff. And one of the ones I encountered recently was like Naxalt, where it's like not all X are like that, where it's basically like people often use like the end of a bell curve to where you're like, most things are like this. And they're like, that's not true. I know someone like this. And so they try to like invalidate the entire like law of averages because they can think of one example where it wasn't true. But those ideas where you can, or like
Elmo.
Elmo.
Enough, let's move on.
Where you can just be like, right, it feels like this isn't working, like, or I do this often when I'm trying to like teach myself a behavior. I'm like, give an example, and like now if I'm like editing something with a team or something, I'm like, ooh, instead of being like, make sure you give an example so you can ensure that people understand what you're saying, but also demonstrate it in such a way that they can see, even in a sacrificial version, what you're trying to accomplish. You know, it's like, give an example accomplishes it, right? You know?
Oh, yeah, that's so true. It's so funny because the more that we talk, the more things that like out of the blue come up. Like now that we're talking about work wisdoms, like another one, and that Ben really likes to dole out wisdoms, it turns out. Another one that I was just mentioning to someone today that he mentioned to me was like, can we remove half the words? Like, can we do it? Like, could you say that in half of the length of space?
What if there were half the words?
What if, just like, I don't know, but what if there were?
What if there were half is like maybe like an even more generalizable rule.
Exactly.
Like not just on the words, like what if there were half?
Yeah, what is that enough? Like could that be good enough actually?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's the inverse of like, or it's somehow related to the phrase too cute by half. It's just like most things you could probably cut in half.
Yeah.
Like,
or then also, what about like, or ¿por qué no los dos? It's like, why can't we have both of them?
Yeah. If one is good, two is better.
It's like, and now that is the opposite can also be true. I mean, I think that's the other thing about folklore, or folkloric wisdom is like, it's like a Newtonian principle. There's like an equal and opposite folkloric wisdom for everything.
It fits with our law that we invented at some point that we can never remember the name that we came up with of like the Newtonian role, like Newtonian law of polarization or whatever. Like whatever your most extreme opinion that you individually hold, someone holds it. Just by you having that opinion, you guarantee that someone has the equal and opposite opinion. You're like, I think all pickles should be lit on fire, right? And it's like, I don't know, like just come up with like some absurd thing that like you believe in. And you're like, I think shoelaces are the greatest invention in human history. And then someone else is like, nope, it's Velcro. I think shoelaces are the worst invention that we've ever come up with, right? Like,
yeah, I feel as though that must have been related to that long ago conversation we had about like niches and fragmented pockets of culture, and how people have a remarkable capacity to have like their whole identity built around a completely opposing concept.
You have your like kitchen rule that you have around like all one needs is a spoon and chopsticks
and a bowl. Don't forget
and a bowl. Don't forget the bowl.
The most critical
but they're
element here.
Just by like feeling that, you can guarantee there is someone who thinks like, no, actually just fork, knife, and plate. Like that's all. Bowls, chopsticks, and spoons are dumb. I don't eat soup.
I only do flat items that don't roll or slide.
Yeah, it's called flatware for a reason. Get your convex, your Tauruses, get all of them out of my life.
Concave? Don't caves go in? No, you're so right. Everything I've known about everything is a lie.
Well,
what?
what is happening?
Oh no! Doesn't a concave go in like a cave?
Yeah,
like
convex, concave. I mean, are you like asking if concave is a word?
Turns out if you search the word concave, the visual diagrams are very misleading and made me question everything I've ever known.
Well, it's just like a point of like perspective, because like for every convex, like the opposite side of it is concave and vice versa, right?
Exactly. So some of the diagrams did not.
But words like concavity, great word.
Oh.
Great word.
Within a cavity.
It's like you would call like a concave point on some surface a concavity.
Yeah.
Which is like great word.
Can you say convexity? Indeed you can.
Whoa. So like a pimple is a convexity?
Hell yeah.
Well, we've jumped the shark.
A pimple is a convexity?
Yeah. Well, Jessica, can you take us to our folk wisdom corner? Truly, like this conversation, maybe I should do it. This conversation was about, I thought that was a smart thing, and I wanted to talk about it, and we did. Like, that was it. It's not really. Maybe you should wrap it up.
You're like, I tried Joey's wrap-up corner, and actually, I'd like to pass it over to you.
Yeah, I like your version better.
Let's see if I can remember as many of these as possible. You hate everyone, eat. Everyone hates you, sleep. You're an adult. That's what money's for. Do the extra thing. What if they're half the words? Why can't we have both? You're not stupid. Don't act like that. What's the bad thing? Maybe try 3 times. It's the night before, and the car before the car before. Pimple is a convexity.
God helps those who help themselves.
That's right.
That was the only one I think that I could think of.
I even wrote that down. Dang. Oh, well, I'm 20 minutes wiser and more interested in doing a collection of these. Perhaps we will revisit this at a later date with more wisdoms to share, because I feel like the people have ideas.
We should also consider broken wisdoms at some. In for a penny, in for a pound, broken wisdom.
Well, there you have it.
Well, we did it.
Yep.
Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by Knowledge Bomb.
As always, we'd like to thank our executive producer and folksy Minnesotan, Jess Vander. She's not from Minnesota.
We'd also like to thank sound engineer and dumpling rapper Alex Conto.
We'd like to thank our programming coordinator and mad truth teller, Les Jacobs.
And thanks to our production crew, the wisest of them all, Sarah Gilbert and Norma Stretch.
And as always, thanks, Len.
Thanks, Len.
Special thanks to idioms and folk wisdoms and fables and fairy tales. They're more fun. It's more fun to learn that way.
Truly, you're so right. We could spend a whole, imagine this. We could spend a whole episode just trying to distill a bunch of stories into their, like, what is like the core lesson of Harry Potter?
What is the core lesson of Harry Potter? I've only seen the movies, first of all.
Probably like Friends.
I mean, the core lesson of Harry Potter feels like the devil and God are inside me.
Whoa.
Right? Like that's what like, or that like we all exist with sin and we're trying to like cleanse ourselves of it.
Whoa.
It feels very like
One
Christian and like messianic to me.
Oh, interesting. I was like, are you describing the premise of Twilight, the series? Stephanie Meyer.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting.
You don't think that that's what it's about?
Well, we're gonna have to revisit this.
Right, like he literally has like Voldemort inside him.
Yeah.
Who is the devil.
Wow.
And he's trying to clean himself of the devil by like fighting against evil. And like he has to die in order to be like reborn clean.
Whoa.
Like it's pretty messianic.
Wow. Yeah, meanwhile I'm like,
I don't know that was
the chocolate frog.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know that was her intention. I don't know that she was like, anyways, Jesus. Like, but
this is really enlightening to me and feels like we absolutely could do an exercise like this. We'll have to bring Aaron in.
Oh, it would be funny to be like, there's the version of like what are like the hero's journey, like the 7 or 9 stories or whatever.
Yeah.
But it might be more interesting to create like our own like like messianic myth, like unless that's already one of those. But like trying to like just take a bunch of movies and be like, what is it? Like in like the like food cube rule type of thing and be like,
it's actually one of these.
Major League 2 is actually a messianic, it's like.
Yeah, it's almost the anti-Netflixation of things, which allow for many, 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 many genres to possibly exist. And it's like, actually, when we catalog by story arc, it's really, you're right. The seven stories, meaning the premise that all stories basically follow these same arcs, and like the hero's journey being a classic tale, and the example used typically is the Odyssey.
Yeah.
The Homeric epic.
Yeah. But it's like you could be like messianic myth. Cinderella could like actually just be one of them. Like the new movie with Anne Hathaway that was also a fanfic about Harry Styles that got turned into like a book that got turned into a movie. Like how many like fanfics like I mean 50 Shades of Grey was fanfic of Twilight.
Yeah. So and thus is High School Musical, the musical, the series, Joey. Where else do these things come from? Come on.
But like the idea of the new Anne Hathaway movie, which is fanfic originally about Harry Styles, is actually just Cinderella.
And therefore,
the prince eventually found her.
Right. Well, there you go.
Even though
so predictable.
The
we
media
just like the same things.
The media is the evil stepmother, but she couldn't fight off love finding a way. I don't know. I don't know if this works, but I'm like really building up this house of cards.
We're gonna make this happen at a future date. Special thanks to making this happen at a future date. Special thanks to Anne Hathaway. Yeah, that's all I have.
That's all it is. Well, we did it.
We did
Love you, mean it. Bye.
Bye. Critical. Nope. Lies. I'm just like, who am I? You?
Yeah.